Have you ever noticed that true brilliance almost never gets a standing ovation? Actually, scratch that. It usually gets the exact opposite. Whispers, crossed arms, this thick, undeniable tension in the room. Why is that? Why do brilliant minds face so much resistance instead of, admiration? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the hidden psychological mechanics behind a deeply strange human phenomenon. We're looking under the hood of human behavior to uncover a story about insecurity, survival instincts, and, well, the incredibly fragile human ego. So, why does a brilliant mind make us feel unsafe? Let's paint a picture. Imagine you're sitting in a room. Maybe it's a Monday morning meeting at work or just a casual dinner with friends. Everyone is comfortable, confident, the vibes are good. And then, someone new walks in. But this person doesn't just nod along with the group. They start asking deeper questions. They point out things literally everyone else missed. They casually challenge the very assumptions the whole room just accepted without a second thought. And instantly the atmosphere shifts. You can feel it. People get defensive, some shut down completely, while others puff out their chests trying to prove themselves. Or they just instantly decide, yeah, I don't like this person. But why? Why does one sharp mind suddenly make the rest of the room feel so threatened? Well, that brings us to Chapter 1, Why We Fear Brilliance. You see, this reaction, it has absolutely nothing to do with IQ scores or fancy college degrees. It's a story deeply rooted in human insecurity and social status. It's all about how we protect ourselves. There's this huge disconnect between what the smart person intends and how the group reacts. Think about an intelligent action. Say someone foreseeing a massive risk in a project or simply asking, hey, why do we actually believe this? They aren't trying to embarrass anybody, they're just solving a giant puzzle. But the insecure reaction to that? Defensiveness, exclusion, feeling attacked. That raw intelligence unintentionally exposes the gaps and weaknesses that others have worked so hard to hide. The brilliance basically becomes a giant spotlight that nobody ever asked to be turned on. Let's dig into the science of this in Chapter 2, How Intelligence Threatens the Ego. To really understand this, we need to look at what psychologists call the ego threat. The human ego is basically wired to desperately want to feel important and competent. We build our entire identities around what we know. So when someone walks in who is clearly significantly more knowledgeable, the ego doesn't just say, oh, awesome, a learning opportunity. No way, it panics. It goes into full defense mode. People will unconsciously criticize or socially exclude a highly intelligent person just to protect their own ego from that really profound, uncomfortable feeling of inadequacy. And the neuroscience behind this is absolutely fascinating. Think about when you face a physical danger, like, say, a speeding car swerving into your lane. The fear center of your brain, the amygdala, instantly lights up to keep you alive. Well, researchers have found that when you are confronted with your own intellectual inferiority, that exact same alarm system goes off. Your brain literally cannot tell the difference between a physical threat to your body and an intellectual threat to your ego. To your brain, it's all just screaming, danger. Which leads us to a pretty massive question. What actually happens when our comfortable beliefs are challenged? Look, human beings love certainty. We construct these elaborate worldviews because they give us psychological comfort. So when an intelligent person asks for evidence or suggests another explanation, your brain doesn't just think, oh, a difference of opinion. No, because your beliefs are so tightly woven into your identity, a challenge to those beliefs feels like a direct, personal attack on who you are as a human being. And there's one specific group of people whose alarm bells ring louder than anyone else's: manipulators. Highly intelligent people are incredibly difficult to control. Why? Because they think critically. They don't just take things at face value. They ask for the receipts, they analyze hidden motives, and they can spot cognitive biases from a mile away. So, for someone who relies on, say, emotional manipulation to control a group, a brilliant mind isn't just annoying. It's a genuine existential threat. Now, let's zoom out a bit for Chapter 3, Disrupting the Social Order. When we move from individual brain mechanics to entire societies, history is basically just one long, repetitive track record of humanity punishing its most brilliant minds. It's wild. In ancient Greece, Socrates was literally sentenced to death for questioning the status quo. In the 17th century, Galileo was placed under house arrest just for proving the Earth moved around the sun. Jump to the 20th century, and Nikola Tesla died penniless despite basically inventing the foundations of our modern electrical grid. Societies have pretty much always favored conformity over truth.
Groups just function smoother when everyone thinks the same way, right? Innovation brings uncertainty, and uncertainty creates a deep collective fear. But you don't need to look at history books to see this in action. It happens in our workplaces every single day. Human societies naturally form traditional hierarchies. We assign status based on wealth, age, authority, or just how long someone has been sitting at a specific desk. But raw intelligence completely blows that up. Imagine the pure anxiety when a brand new 20-something employee spots a fatal flaw in the veteran manager's big 10-year plan, or when a student respectfully corrects a teacher. It strips away the comfort of unearned status, and the people at the top feel incredibly threatened by that kind of intellectual disruption.
Actually, think back for a second. Have you ever noticed this happening when we were kids? Picture your old classroom. There was always that one kid, right? The one who just understood the math concepts instantly, while the rest of us were totally lost. And how did the group react to them? Sure, maybe a few were impressed, but usually that kid triggered intense jealousy. They were called names or deliberately left out at recess. It just goes to show that fearing intelligence isn't some corporate habit we pick up later in life. It's an innate, deeply rooted psychological trait. That social comparison creates insecurity from a very, very young age.
All right, here comes the big pivot. Chapter 4, the intellectual mirror effect. This is where we hit the biggest paradigm shift in this whole explainer. We basically have to flip everything we just talked about totally upside down. Because here is the profound hidden truth. Society doesn't actually fear intelligence itself. Intelligence is just raw brain power. What people are actually terrified of are the feelings that intelligence brings out inside of them. The real fears are things like feeling uninformed, being proven wrong, losing our social status, facing uncertainty, and having to do the really hard work of rethinking our foundational beliefs.
It's perfectly summarized by this idea. The intelligent individual becomes a mirror, and not everyone enjoys what they see in that reflection. I really want you to let that sink in for a second. The brilliant person is literally just existing. They're just processing information and solving problems, but to the insecure observer, that person becomes a massive mirror, reflecting back their own limitations, their own blind spots, and all of their unearned confidence. So, the friction, it is never actually about the intelligent person. It's entirely about the internal security of the person watching them. To a secure mind, a highly intelligent person is a total gift. It's an opportunity to learn and level up. But to the insecure mind, that exact same intelligence is an overwhelming threat. It's something that must be feared, diminished, or completely pushed away just to keep the ego perfectly intact. Which brings us to our final section, Chapter 5, Embracing the Brilliant Mind. So where do we go from here? If we really want to evolve, we have to change our relationship with brilliance. And there's a beautiful irony to all of this. The truly intelligent people, the ones provoking all this accidental fear, they usually don't see themselves as superior at all. In fact, the more you learn, the more you realize just how incredibly little you actually know. True intelligence creates profound humility. When intelligence is paired with empathy, it doesn't try to dominate a room, it tries to understand it. The smartest people are usually just the most intensely curious. And this is why this matters to every single one of us. When we give in to our amygdalas, when we let our egos suppress the brilliant minds in our schools, our offices, and our communities, we are severely limiting humanity's potential. We are actively choosing comfortable stagnation over progress. But when we can swallow our pride and actually embrace that intellectual disruption, that's when we unlock the future. So I'm going to leave you with one final provocative thought. The next time you find yourself in a room and someone walks in who is clearly sharper, faster, and more insightful than you, I want you to notice that feeling in your chest. Notice the ego threat, and then ask yourself, will you choose to be threatened by the mirror, or will you have the courage to use it to grow? Because the greatest sign of wisdom isn't necessarily having a brilliant mind. It's having the courage to learn from one. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, stay curious.